Hey there. Welcome back to Nothing But Anime. It's time for part 7 of our What If Deku Had Powerful Weapon Quirk series. If you're having fun with the content, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more. Let's jump right in and see what happens next. Once Izuku got back to the apartment, Mom had already put together a frame for the medal, which was immediately sealed and hung on the dividing wall between the kitchen and the dining room. Next to it hung Izuku's UA acceptance letter, the Quirk diagnosis report from Iwakaru-san, and a printed photo of the first time Izuku got 100% completion on a save file. Tuesday and Wednesday were spent relaxing and watching the second-year and third-year sports festivals on the TV. On Wednesday, Izuku took notice of a blonde kid that he recognized from last year for having accidentally lost his pants in the middle of the second event. This year, he thankfully didn't have that issue, as his pants seemed to phase with him. The blonde ended up getting first, alongside a girl with sky blue hair and a boy with pointed ears. The blonde and the girl seemed to soak in the attention from the cameras, while the other boy looked like he wanted to just curl up in a ball and hide. UA students were given Thursday and Friday off to rest and recuperate from the events of the festival. On Friday, Ochako came over to the apartment with the rest of the hero hopefuls. Izuku raised an eyebrow at the sling around her right arm. "I thought you were good to go right before the finals of our festival." Ochako rubbed at her neck with her left hand. "Yeah, well, while Recovery Girl had healed my arm from when I punched that cement block, it was still recovering and pretty weak. As a result, all the cheering and waving I did aggravated it, and the pain hit as I was walking out of the stadium to head home. Would have hit the dirt if Kyuka hadn't caught me and taken me to the nurse's office. I've been wearing this sling since Monday evening." Kyuka nodded and plopped down in Izuku's lap, resting her elbow on the arm of the couch and leaning her cheek on her fist. "So, I know you've told me the reason behind the feral rage thing, but I doubt you've told any of the others." Katsuki sat up straighter from where he was sitting against the wall by the TV. "Yeah, I was wondering that myself. You told me you'd explain after the festival." Ochako nodded and rubbed at her upper right arm. "Yeah, I've got a bit of a problem related to my genetics. See, my grandma on my mom's side had a shape-shifting quirk. She could turn into all kinds of animals on the spot. A panther, a horse, a falcon, anything. The downside was that whatever form she took mostly overrode her human instincts. While Mom didn't inherit the quirk, she did inherit the whole animal instincts thing. The main reason she and Dad got married was because he always had some kind of calming aura, which meant he could get her out of her fits. Mom was afraid that I'd randomly go into feral rages like she would. Coulda hummed. "But you're always so bubbly and cheerful. If your mom's fits were so common, we would have noticed by now, right?" Ochako nodded once Izuku translated. "True. If I was the same, I probably would have had a fit by the time the festival rolled around. But something happened in my genetics. My quirk's a weird mutation, not at all like my parents' quirks. Mom's quirk lets her sense the emotions of other people, and Dad can mold steel with his hands like it's clay. Neither of those would reasonably combine into my quirk. In any case, we think that Mom's quirk and the animal instincts inherited from Grandma kind of fused to give me a sort of berserker rage." Izuku raised an eyebrow. "You mean like Thor in those old comics?" "Kinda. See, if my adrenaline gets too high or I get too angry, then my instincts take over and I lash out towards whoever caused it. That's why I only went after Katsuki in that state. Since my adrenaline gets channeled into that extreme fight or flight response, I'm usually pretty stress-free and bubbly. We've thought about finding a therapist, but money was always kinda tight, even before Mom and Dad got scammed." Kyuka huffed. "So, how many episodes have you had?" "2 if you include the one during the sports festival. The only other instance was back in elementary school. I was walking home, and I ran into a couple of older kids picking on some of my classmates. I ran in to help, but they quickly ganged up on me. One of them grabbed me by the face and slammed me into the wall, and that activated the berserker state." Katsuki winced. "Guess it didn't help that I grabbed your face during our fight. Must have triggered it like a PTSD flashback. Sorry." She waved her left hand dismissively. "Nah, don't worry. I hadn't told you, so don't blame yourself for not knowing. It's not a thing I like to talk about, anyways." Izuku narrowed his eyes at Kyuka. "So then why did she tell you before anyone else?" Kyuka leaned her head back to grin up at him. "I have a knack for getting people to spill their secrets. Aizawa-sensei's already offered to teach me interrogation techniques one-on-one." Ochako coughed into her fist. "That, and she overheard me talking to my parents about it on the phone after I gave my account of the USJ. She kinda cornered me behind a bush and demanded an explanation. I figured that since she can hear heartbeats, I might as well be honest." Kirishima shrugged. "Fair enough. Still, keeping something important like that to yourself won't help in the long run. I totally get wanting to look strong, but it's not manly to hide things that could get you hurt." Everyone looked at him weirdly, and he blushed. "You know what I meant." Everyone started laughing, save for Kuda, who simply smiled widely. After they calmed down, Izuku leaned forward and reached around Kyuka to pull a crate of controllers out from under the couch. "So, who's up for a bit of Smash Ultimate?" Glancing up, he paused as everyone pulled out their own controllers. "I guess everyone then." Mei glanced around the room before putting her controller back in her bag. "I think I'll sit this one out, that way there's 8 players. Kyuka snapped her fingers in disappointment. "Darn, I was gonna talk to you about a potential support item." There was a light cough from the hallway, and everyone turned to see Mom standing in the doorway, smiling and holding up her own controller. Go ahead and talk to Hatsum, dearie. I haven't played against fresh blood in ages. Kyuka smiled and hopped up off Izuku's lap, immediately grabbing Mei by the arm and dragging her over to the dining room table. Izuku grinned and turned on the switch, quickly setting up an 8-player tournament. All right then, let's play. The others left the house that night with the understanding to never challenge Mom to a 5-on-1 game of Smash Ultimate. Her Daisy had absolutely destroyed Hitoshi's Incineroar, Ochako's Jigglypuff, Kirishima's Bowser, Kaminari's Pikachu, and Kuda's Inkling all at the same time. The following Monday, Aizawa-sensei walked back into the classroom, his arm noticeably missing a sling. He smirked at the cheers of the class, before raising his hand to silence them. Recovery girl finished treating my arm yesterday, and I am now cleared for hero work. Go ahead and get your celebrations out now. Shako frowned. Ah, I was hoping we could be sling buddies. Aizawa-sensei glanced at her right arm and frowned. Right, Uraraka. I need to speak to you after classes today about what happened during the festival. She nodded. Speaking of the festival, good work. None of you made total fools of yourselves, and you remembered to use your classmates' hero names instead of their real names. If you were hoping to make an impression. He pulled out a remote and hit a button. You certainly did. The blackboard behind the hero was suddenly filled with names and numbers. After a few seconds, Ochako gasped and pointed to them with her free hand. Those are internship offers. Bingo. I only briefly mentioned them when you were coming up with your code names, but now's when we go into more detail about them. Internships are where you go and stay at a pro heroes agency for a week to get hands-on experience with hero work. You won't be allowed to go out and fight crimes on your own, but you will be patrolling with your supervisor at various points throughout the week. As for which agencies you can go with, well, that's partially dictated by the festival. He tapped the board. Most agencies watch the sports festival, so they can look for students with potential that they're willing to take on as interns. If they're impressed with a hero student, they'll send in an offer. Of course, it's up to you who you go with, since you can only be at one agency for the week. Aoyama, who had a 0 next to his name, raised his hand. Monsieur, what about those of us who did not receive any offers? Aizawa-sensei nodded. Reasonable question. If you didn't receive any offers, there are 40 agencies partnered with UA who accept all hero students as interns. You'll be allowed to choose one of them if you didn't get any offers. The same goes for if you got 10 or fewer offers. Hagakure raised her hand, the shift of her sleeve just barely noticeable. But why did some people get so many? Izuku huffed. Simple. A lot of people were watching the class that got attacked by villains. And you'll notice that those with more offers got farther into the festival. And he would know his name had the highest number of offers out of the entire class, a whopping 5,043. Katsuki was close behind at 4,962 offers. Kyuka had received 4,185 offers, and Kirishima had 3,847. Surprisingly, Todoroki had the next highest number of offers at 3,124, despite not having even gotten past the second round. The two-toned boy grunted. Probably a bunch of freeloaders who want to piggyback off of Endeavor's reputation. Izuku glanced down the list and frowned. Ochako had only gotten a single offer, despite the fact that she had gotten pretty far in the festival. How come Ochako only got one offer? She outperformed most of the class in the festival, but she got less offers than people who didn't even get to the tournament. Aizawa-sensei sighed. It's because of her fight with Bakugu. While you all know her personally, most of the heroes in attendance only saw her turn into a feral animal during her match, and that put most of them off. Still, I wouldn't be too discouraged. Ochako raised her hand, but he cut her off by pulling out a stack of papers. Class rep, vice rep, distribute these. Izuku and Yaoyorozu quickly walked to the front and started passing out the packets of papers. These packets contain your offers, listed in alphabetical order and with important information about each agency, commanding hero, number of sidekicks, location, etc. I recommend researching your top picks on your own time. Izuku frowned. The packets had all been passed out, but some students were still without their list of offers. What about the rest of us? Aizawa-sensei grinned and reached into the podium, pulling out a stack of tablets. Those of you with offers in the quadruple digits will use these instead, since a physical packet would be too unwieldy. Once the tablets had been distributed, Aizawa-sensei glanced up at the clock. Since you've already decided on your hero names, you have the rest of this week to submit up to your top 3 choices to me. Internships are next week, so choose wisely. That'll be all for now. Dismissed. Uraraka. Remember to find me after classes today. As the hero walked out the door, the bell rang, and the class started filtering out towards the lockers. Izuku walked over to Ochako's desk, where she had a solemn expression on her face. You all right? Yeah, just, I hate that most of the heroes only looked at my feral state and assumed that I was like that all the time. I just wonder who my sole offer came from. Izuku patted her on the shoulder. Don't sweat it. If they don't seem like a good fit for you, then you can always go with one of the 40 agencies partnered with UA, right? She sniffed. Right? Lunchtime found the hero hopefuls sitting at a table in the cafeteria, the usual chatter absent as most of them looked through their various offers. Ochako picked at her food, occasionally glancing around at the others. So, Izuku, who do you think you're gonna go with? Izuku frowned, tapping the filter button and making a few adjustments. Not sure yet. There's a lot of offers here and I found a few good ones, but nobody's really stood out to me yet. The sound of footsteps registered in his mind, and he glanced up from his tablet to see Yaoyorozu standing by the table with a tray in one hand and her packet in the other. Would you mind helping me look through my offers? I thought that, since our quirks function similarly, you might have some insight on where I should go. Izuku grinned and patted the seat next to him. Of course. I'd be a terrible class representative if I didn't help out my vice rep. Yaoyorozu sat down and started flipping through her packet of offers. I had initially considered going with Iwabumi alongside Kendo-san. I thought that she would be able to provide insight on how to be a woman in a mostly male industry. Izuku winced. Didn't you say you wanted to get away from being ladylike and all that? And even then, Iwabumi would be more likely to tell you how to turn a hero career into a celebrity status. She barely does any rescue work nowadays, instead focusing on her product line of makeup, perfume, clothing, and accessories. Katsuki nodded. Dad always hates this time of year, because it's when Iwabumi puts out more commercials than usual and gives his own line a hard time pulling in new customers. The regulars already know that Dad's shit is top quality. But unfortunately, being a hero sells well. Izuku nodded in agreement. I wouldn't be surprised if she sent offers to the two of you because of your pretty faces. Glancing over at Kyuka, he blushed at her half-hearted glare. Objectively pretty faces. Kyuka huffed. That's what I thought. Yaoyorozu winced. I see. That likely would not have gone well, as I intend to focus on hero work over commercial deals and the like. Do you have any recommendations? Izuku frowned, grabbing her packet. He flipped through it and a name about a third of the way and caught his attention. Hey, looky here. You got an offer from Fat Gum. Yaoyorozu leaned forward and squinted at the paper. Are you sure? He's quite a distance away, and he's not very well known. Izuku nodded. True, but he's probably the most knowledgeable hero in the country when it comes to stockpiling and consumption-based quirks. I've heard that one of this year's big three actually does a work study at Fat Gum's agency. Katsuki's eyes widened. Yeah, that shy dude with pointy ears. He was on the winner's podium for the third-year sports festival last week. Izuku nodded and a thought struck. He quickly turned back to his tablet and filtered for offers that started with F, brightening when Fat Gum's agency showed up at the top of the list. I got an offer from Fat Gum, too. Maybe we could intern with him together. Yaoyorozu brightened. That sounds wonderful. I was afraid that I would be uncomfortable so far from home. But if someone I know is going to be there, then that eases most of my concerns. Ida walked by the table. Ochako watched him as he passed, before leaning forward. Has anyone noticed Ida acting a little weird recently? I don't know him all that well, but he seems stiffer than usual. Yaoyorozu hummed. I only know him because I've been to several hero galas, since my parents are well known in the support industry, but you're right. Something seems off with him. Izuku winced. And I think I know what it is. Didn't you check the news? Ingenium was attacked by Stain last Monday. He survived, but he's in a coma, and the doctors are saying there's a good chance that he'll be paralyzed from the waist down. Even if he recovers enough to walk, there's a good chance that he won't be able to continue hero work. Katsuki grunted. The hero killer, huh? That sucks. Ingenium's one of the better heroes. Be a damn shame if he has to quit. Izuku nodded, and his tone grew even more serious. Not to mention how it'll affect Ida. His older brother was attacked and paralyzed while he was competing in the festival, and the man who did it is still on the loose. How do you think he's feeling right now? Kyuka hummed. His heartbeat doesn't seem like he's grieving. It's more of a seething rhythm, almost like he's biding his time for something. Izuku went pale. You don't think he's going to try and go after the hero killer to get revenge, do you? Yaoyorozu rubbed her chin. Normally, I would say that he seems too insistent on following the rules, but given the circumstances, I can't deny that it's a possibility. Izuku tapped at his chin. Yaoyorozu, you're closer to him than most of us, right? Think you could get him to at least tell you his internship choices? Please, I think we're close enough that you can use my first name. And it wouldn't hurt to try. Later that day, Izuku and Katsuki were leaning against the window outside one, as classroom after classes had been dismissed for the day. Ochako was currently with Aizawa-sensei in his office, and Momo walked out of the room, her face pale. He only chose Manuel's agency in Hosu. Izuku inhaled sharply. Shit, that basically confirms it. But what can we do to stop him? Momo shook her head sadly. There's not much we can do, especially if the two of us are going to Esuha to intern with Fat Gum. Katsuki grunted. I'll handle it. Izuku raised an eyebrow at the blonde. How? Katsuki smirked and held up his tablet, tapping on a specific offer. Did a little digging. Turns out my second favorite hero is currently renting a place in Hosu, and she sent me an offer for an internship. Ochako gasped as she walked up. Wait, you got an offer from Maruko. My offer came from her too. Izuku brightened. That's great. You're going with her, right? Ochako nodded excitedly. Yeah, she'd probably be able to help me get a handle on my berserker stuff, since she's probably got even stronger animal instincts than me. Katsuki grinned. Then it's settled. Uraraka and I will go with Maruko and try to keep glasses out of trouble. Meanwhile, you two go to Fat Gum and focus on your internships without having to worry. Izuku snorted and lightly punched Katsuki in the arm. I'm still gonna worry. Even being in the same city as the hero killer is reason enough to be cautious. Katsuki rolled his eyes. Whatever. Not like we're gonna be fighting him, and he hasn't gone after hero students yet. Izuku's smile dropped. Doesn't mean he won't start. Nobody knows his MO, or why he started going after heroes. It's entirely possible that he could try and cut off future generations of heroes before they graduate. Katsuki nodded, his expression turning serious. Fair enough. I'll keep an eye out. Chapter 24. Izuku and Momo waved out the window at the rest of the class standing on the waiting platform. The train quickly picked up speed, heading out of the station and towards Esuha City in the Kansai region. Due to the distance they were traveling, they'd been among the first to leave, preceded only by Fumikage, who had chosen to intern under Hawks in the Kyushu region. Once the train station had vanished over the horizon, Izuku sat back in his seat and turned to Momo. So, you talked to Mei last week like I suggested, right? The girl nodded and glanced down at her costume case. She was very insistent that my costume be redesigned. I haven't yet had the chance to try it on, but from what I've heard from other members of our class, I believe that it should prove satisfactory. Izuku grinned. It will. Mei gives her clients nothing but the best. Momo frowned. Still, it was unnerving to watch her and her classmates drag one of the boys around without giving him a chance to breathe. Should I be worried? Izuku grunted. That's Gumin. He was being sexist when we visited the support department on the first day of classes, so Power Loader made him the class test dummy for the month. Don't worry about it. A couple hours later, the train screeched to a halt as it entered Esuha Station, and the automated voice declared their arrival. Izuku stood up and grabbed his luggage from the overhead compartment, slinging his backpack over his shoulder and holding his costume case by his hip. This is our stop. Come on. As they got off the train, Izuku could see a giant yellow hoodie sticking out of the crowd, the 8-foot-tall man towering over the rest of the people in the station. Hey, there ya are. Izuku grinned and made his way over to the hero, aware that Momo was following at a short distance. The raven-haired girl bowed and said, It's a pleasure to meet you in person, sir. Fat Gum grinned. You two must be Save Point and Creati. He turned to Momo. I was impressed by your performances in the obstacle race and cavalry battle. Shame you didn't make it to the tournament, though. But hey, we've got the whole week to see just what you're capable of. He turned back to Izuku. As for you, I'm just impressed overall. You put on quite a show out there. Izuku grinned. What is a streamer, if not a performer? Fat Gum chuckled. Sticking to the persona, eh? In any case, let's get to the agency. Thankfully, it's not far. As they left the station, Izuku casually asked, So, your quirk allows you to absorb things into your fat, right? How do you manage to keep fit while still maintaining that thick outer layer? The short answer is that it's because of my quirk. See, my body's adapted to handle large amounts of fat without any of the usual side effects that a normal person would have. I'm guessing your quirk operates in a similar fashion. Izuku held a finger to his lips. I'm not giving out any details about my quirk until we're at the agency. You never know who could be listening in. Ha! Fair enough, little guy. Izuku pouted. Hey, I'm not little. You're just huge. Momo coughed into her fist. I feel it bears mentioning that you are one of the shortest members of the class. Izuku huffed, all 155 centimeters of him. I'm not short. I'm travel-sized. Fat Gum snorted as they rounded the corner, soon finding themselves in front of a tall building stylized to look like the hero. The man opened the front door and led the way inside, starting with the reception area. The receptionist looked up and grinned at the sight of the BMI hero. Fat, welcome back. I'm guessing the kids are first-year interns from UA. Fat Gum nodded, laying a massive hand on Izuku's shoulder. This here is Save Point, the guy who won the whole darn thing. The receptionist blinked, before pushing up her glasses and peering at him. Ha, so he is. Why'd you pick this agency? You probably had offers from way higher-ranking heroes. Izuku scoffed. Ranks don't mean a damn thing to me. I wanted to go with a hero who would know a lot about a quirk like mine, and this place fit the bill perfectly. The receptionist grinned. Fair enough. She held out her hand. Kenju Shiru. I go by Vibe Checkout in the field. Izuku returned the handshake. Midoriya Izuku. I go by Save Point, but you already knew that. This is Yaoyorozu Momo, hero name Creati. Momo stepped forward to shake hands with Vibe Check, and Fat Gum cleared his throat. If you three are nice and acquainted, we can get on with the tour of the agency. Yeah? Izuku clicked his tongue. In a rush, huh? Where's the fire? You looking to burn some calories? Vibe Check burst into cackles and started smacking the desk. Fat Gum crossed his arms and stared at her with an unimpressed expression. After a few seconds, she drew in a deep breath and laid an arm on the wooden surface. Sorry, boss, it's just, I've never heard someone be that sarcastic with you, especially since Sun Eater started his work study here. Fat Gum rolled his eyes. Hilarious. Well, we'd better get going. There's only so much time in the day, and there's a few things I'd like to show these kids. Vibe Check schooled her expression and grinned up at the man. Yeah, go ahead. She glanced back at Izuku. By the way, if you've got any more of those, feel free to let 'em rip. Izuku grinned. Oh, I intend to. Fat Gum coughed and quickly led the way towards the back of the agency. Even before they got there, Izuku could smell the kitchen from the hallway. The hero said, "So, since I employ a lot of food-based sidekicks, we've got multiple fully stocked kitchens running day in and day out. Originally, the chef specialized in high-calorie items to help with my quirk, but as the quirks of the sidekicks got more diverse, so did the capabilities of the chefs." He opened the double doors, and Izuku's nose was assaulted by an incredible range of smells. He could pick out at least 11 different meals from the scents alone, ranging from traditional Japanese meals like udon and ramen, to foreign stuff like spaghetti and tacos, and even a few American dishes like pizza and hamburgers. Wow, diverse is an understatement. Momo nodded, clearly in shock from the sheer amount of action in the kitchen. Chefs were running all over the place, from sinks to cutting boards to ovens to hibachi counters to stovetops filled with boiling pots of water. This is certainly very different from the kitchens back home. Fat Gum grinned and snagged a tray of takoyaki balls from a passing chef, immediately taking a deep sniff. Ah, that's always great. Takoyaki smells like home to me, so it's probably the most common food item at the agency. He reached into one of his belt pouches and pulled out a box of toothpicks, immediately taking one out and stabbing it into a ball of fried octopus, offering it to the two interns. Want one? Momo shook her head, but Izuku casually reached out and took the toothpick, immediately biting off the ball of food and chewing it. Pretty good. Could be a bit warmer, though. Fat Gum raised an eyebrow. That one was steaming hot, fresh out of the oven, and you want it warmer? How did you not burn your mouth? Izuku swallowed. Vestigial mutation from my dad. His quirk let him breathe fire, and his mouth and throat were fireproof, so he could use his quirk without burning himself. Fat Gum whistled. Wow, how's your heat tolerance? Not nearly as high, but still pretty high. I think that 250 degrees Celsius in my mouth is comparable to direct sunlight on my skin. He reached over and stabbed another ball of takoyaki, immediately popping it in his mouth. Major downside is that cold foods are extra cold. Ice cream is like the bane of my existence. Fat Gum snorted, before pulling out another toothpick and stabbing it into his own ball of takoyaki, blowing on it before sticking it into his mouth. That sucks. Ice cream is really good, especially during the summer. Izuku shrugged. So I've heard. But hey, at least I can still enjoy stuff like mochi and chocolate. You can't go wrong with strawberry mochi, I say. The hero chuckled. Fair enough. They left the kitchen and headed up the stairs. At one point, Izuku and Fat Gum reached for the same ball of takoyaki, which devolved into a mini sword fight with toothpicks while Momo watched. Izuku's toothpick was knocked out of his grasp, and he moaned theatrically while Fat Gum grinned and helped himself to another. No, curse you, vile thief. You will rue the day you denied save point his righteous hors d'oeuvre. Momo snorted, and Izuku stared at her. I didn't know it was even physically possible for you to make that sound. Momo smiled. And I didn't know that you knew the phrase, hors d'oeuvre, so I suppose we're even. Fat Gum snickered and opened the door, leading the way into a space remarkably similar to Gym Alpha at UA. The hero glanced back at their expressions and chuckled. Familiar, isn't it? We remodeled the gym when Tamaki first started coming here, based on his accounts of the training rooms at UA. Izuku raised an eyebrow curiously. Tamaki? Fat Gum nodded. Amajiki Tamaki, also known as Sun Eater. Izuku's eyes widened. Right, I remember seeing him on the TV when I watched the third-year sports festival the other week. Because of the recent attack, they weren't using the real names for any of the hero course students, so I only knew his hero name and physical appearance. The hero chuckled. He'd probably go red if he heard that you watched him on TV. For as skilled as he is, the kid's got serious confidence and anxiety issues. I've been trying to work on it, but he's as stubborn as he is shy. Izuku winced. That's painfully familiar. I used to be like that before my quirk developed. Fat Gum snapped his fingers. Right, that reminds me. Quickly polishing off the tray of takoyaki, he tossed it into a nearby chute in a practiced motion and turned to face the two first years, hands on his hips. So, if I'm gonna properly mentor you, I'm gonna need to know your quirks. From what I saw during the festival, both of you can make stuff, but that's all I know. So, hit me with the details. Izuku stepped forward, holding his hand out and manifesting his Meta Knight sword. The mask appeared over his face, and he quickly lifted it so that it rested on his hair. My quirk is a stockpiler that stores items I've seen and used in video games in a mental inventory. I can then manifest up to a certain number of those items physically using the fat stored in my cells. I don't need to know the ins and outs of how the item would work if it was made in real life, but the more an item stretches the laws of physics, the more space it takes up in my inventory. For instance, making an item that changes size takes up most of my equipped slots and takes a lot more fat to make. I generally stick to smaller, more realistic items for standard stuff and keep some powerful items on hand as a last resort. Fat Gum hummed, rubbing at his chin. Examples? Stuff like the hoverboard I used during the obstacle race and the metal bat I used for most of the tournament only take up a single slot each, since they're mostly plausible within the realm of today's technology. The hammers that I used during my match against Red Riot take up 3 slots, since they have the ability to summon pillars of fire. I used a sword that can grow to about half the size of Mount Lady during the entrance exam, and that took up 3 slots while also leaving me extremely tired afterwards. Fat Gum nodded. Interesting. You brought up dietary stuff on the walk over from the station. What effect does your quirk have on that? On average, I tend to eat about twice as much as a normal person. Thankfully, Lunch Rush is more than willing to give me 2 trays worth of food at lunchtime. Oh, and one of the first-year support students took on my request for a high-calorie food bar. He reached into one of his pockets and pulled out a gamer bar, holding it out to the hero. Go ahead, try one. Fat Gum took it in hand nervously, scanning the packaging before flipping it over. He raised an eyebrow at the nutrition facts label on the back. Interesting. The hero unwrapped the bar and took a bite, chewing a bit before swallowing. His eyes widened, and he looked down at the rest of the bar with renewed interest. Oh, that's good. Packed with calories, too. Which student was this? Shokamatsu Ayo, Class 1H. I might just have to steal her from Power Loader if she can pull off something like this. Izuku grinned. Good luck with that. I think she's running her own mini-company by selling them to other support students and even some of the management students. I think Eraserhead might start buying from her as a replacement for his jelly packets once he hears about her from midnight. Fat Gum blinked, then grinned. She'd make a killing selling these things to underground pros. He shook his head, then looked at Izuku. But back on topic. You use the fat in your cells to make video game items. Neat. He glanced over at Momo. What about you? She balked. I also use the lipids in my body to create items, but unlike Izuku-kun, I have to know the chemical structure in order to make it. In the case of machinery and other tools, I also have to know the schematics. I try to eat as much as I can to ensure that I have fuel for my quirk. She shrank in on herself a little bit. But my parents are afraid that eating too much would ruin my figure, so I'm limited in how much I can eat at home. Fat Gum frowned. Well, that won't do. In that case, our objective for today is to see how your bodies handle excessive eating. People with quirks like ours tend to have mutations that allow them to handle large amounts of food, so it's a good idea to test the limits of those. I'm sure I don't look like it, but even I have to make sure I don't go over a certain number of calories a day. It just so happens that my daily calorie limit is a lot higher than other people's. Katsuki looked up at the rundown building in front of him. This place looks like it's seen better days. You sure this is the address she gave us, Uraraka? The girl looked down at the sheet of paper in her hand, before glancing over at the number on the mailbox set by the front door. Yeah, the numbers match. I guess this is just a rental for while she's in Hosu. Katsuki grunted. Makes sense to me. Uraraka stashed the paper in her pocket and shouldered her bag, grabbing her costume case off the ground. So, do we knock or? Katsuki huffed and walked forward, immediately bringing his foot up and kicking the door open. Papa's home, you damn rabbit. The number 6 heroine glanced up from where she was sitting on the couch and smirked. About damn time. I was thinking you two would take until lunchtime to find the place. Not what you expected, huh? Uraraka glanced around nervously as she followed Katsuki inside. Well, yeah. I kind of thought that someone of your ranking would have a nicer apartment than this, even if it's just a rental. Miruko huffed and turned her attention back to the TV, which was currently set to a news channel talking about the recent rise of criminal activity in Hosu. You kidding? Any decent place wouldn't look decent after even a day of me living in it. Nah, much better to rent out the places that are already partway broken down. That way the landlords can't complain too much when I accidentally break a wall or some shit. Besides, I pay for rent and damages, so they don't really care. So, are you just gonna stand there? Or are we gonna get shit done? Uraraka paused, but Katsuki simply grinned. He tossed his backpack and costume case towards the kitchen and lunged, right hand swinging down towards the heroine. Uraraka shrieked, but Miruko just sprang up off the couch right before the explosion split it in half. The hero grinned, bouncing on the balls of her feet. Now that's more like it, Blondie. Come on, girl, you just gonna stand there? A hero's gotta be ready to throw down at any time, you know? Uraraka sighed and tossed her bag and costume case right next to Katsuki's, before popping her knuckles and settling into a combative stance. Guess I shouldn't have expected anything else. Katsuki smirked and launched himself at Miruko, right fist swinging forward. The heroine bounced to the side, before slamming her left fist into his stomach. He flew into the wall by the door, leaving an impact crater almost twice his height. He coughed as he slid to the floor, but his grin only widened. Uraraka glanced over at him, and Miruko vanished, reappearing in front of the girl and grabbing her arm. She threw Uraraka into the remains of the couch, then hopped to one side as Katsuki lunged, before planting a foot in his backside and sending him face first through the door of the hallway closet. Katsuki placed both hands on the door and pushed, yanking his head out of the newly formed hole. He spat out a couple of splinters and grinned, his hands curled into claws by his side. Let's fucking go, you damn rabbit. Miruko grinned at him, still bouncing on the balls of her feet. See, this is why I sent you an offer, kid. She glanced over at Uraraka and frowned. You, though, you're a whole other can of worms. Uraraka winced. I'm sorry, Miruko grinned. I sent you an offer because you're a can of worms, girl. But you need to prove that you're worth my time. Now get your ass in gear, or I'm sending you back to UA. Uraraka shrugged, before grabbing one half of the couch and picking it up off the floor. Katsuki swiped his hand down, and Maruko danced backwards out of his range, only to throw her arm up to block the chunk of couch that Uraraka swung at her. The two students fell into a rhythm, constantly alternating and never letting up on the heroine for even a moment. To her credit, Maruko just grinned wider and wider as the brawl went on, moving faster and faster to keep pace with them. It was about 10 minutes in when it happened. Uraraka slammed the couch into Maruko's crossed arms, and a low growl escaped her throat. Maruko smirked, and Katsuki realized what she was doing. He huffed. That the best you can do, round face? Come on, where's the strength you had when you fought me? Do better than that weak-ass shit. Uraraka swung again, snarling. Maruko ducked underneath and hopped back, taunting. Is that the best you have? Maybe you're just not cut out to be a hero. Uraraka grabbed the couch piece with her other hand. Shut up, Katsuki shouted. No, the bitch has a point. If you're just gonna keel over and let your opponent walk all over you, then you won't do anyone much good in a fight. Shut up. Maruko tilted her head and grinned. Are you sure you want to go out there and fight people? Or would you rather hug the villains into submission? Shut up. With a roar, Uraraka swung the chunk of furniture at the heroine. Maruko dodged, and the couch slammed into the counter, smashing through it. Immediately, Uraraka swung back. Maruko hopped to the side, and the couch slammed into the wall of the kitchen. The wall crumbled to pieces, as did the chunk of furniture. Uraraka fell to all fours, snarling. She launched herself at Maruko, and the heroine sidestepped. The girl landed on the wall by the fridge, her muscles tightening as she launched herself off the wall towards the hero. The apartment quickly turned into a game of human pinball, where Uraraka and Maruko bounced around off the various walls and pieces of furniture, while Katsuki leaned against the front door and watched with interest. Maruko was clearly leading Uraraka around by the nose, but the girl was too lost in her instincts to notice. With each lunge, Uraraka was slowly being led closer and closer towards a corner of the apartment. This went on for about 5 minutes, with Katsuki tossing out the occasional taunt or insult to keep Uraraka angry. Eventually, she landed on the remaining piece of the couch, laser-focused on where Maruko was standing by the TV. Uraraka snarled and lunged, and the heroine twirled to the side. Olay! Uraraka slammed into the wall face-first, looking almost like one of those old cartoons as she briefly hung in midair. She slowly crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Katsuki carefully walked over and picked her up, heading towards the door labeled, guest. As he suspected, there were 2 beds inside, along with some rudimentary pieces of furniture. Once Uraraka had been laid down on a mattress, Katsuki went back to the living room and crossed his arms. So, the whole point of the offer was to help her with that? Maruko grinned. You catch on fast, blondie. Yeah, I used to have fits like that when I was younger, and I'd be damned if I let someone else try to figure this shit out on their own. You've got a similar beast, but you've already tamed yours. She still needs to get hers under control. Katsuki raised an eyebrow. So you sent me an offer, so that I could help you help her tame her inner monster? The heroine shrugged. More or less. Katsuki grinned. It's a damn good thing you're my second favorite hero. Otherwise I'd complain that you were using me. She raised an eyebrow. Second favorite? Who's the first? Katsuki snorted and pointed at his red, blue, and yellow backpack with a white rabbit keychain. Take a wild fucking guess. And that's a wrap on part 7. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to check out the previous parts in the playlist if you haven't seen them yet. Trust me, you won't want to miss what led up to this moment. A huge shout out to the author for their incredible hard work. Show them some love and support for all the effort they've put into this amazing series. I'll be back soon with more, so stay tuned. And as always, thank you all for your continued support. You all rock.